Tony D and Little Joan in the background, and this is a screenwriting tips, more of a comedy writing tip. I'm going to pick on this movie called Friendship that I couldn't even finish. I did not really like it. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys books 1 through 18, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. So, what's the number one rule in comedy? As we all know, it has to be funny. In a movie, most of the rest of the movie doesn't matter. If the movie is funny, if you're laughing throughout, then you're good. You're good. So I was watching this movie called Friendship. I guess I got about, I'm going to say 20 minutes to a half hour into it. It stars, what's his face? Craig something? No, Tim Robinson. His character's name's Craig, and Paul Rudd. And the premise is, Tim's character is a neighbor of Paul Rudd, who I think recently moves in. And he meets him, and he's like the coolest neighbor ever. But then, and this was from the trailer, which I looked at, which looked pretty good. But the idea is that they become, he at first he doesn't want to become his friend, and then he reluctantly goes to his house and finds out Paul Rudd is the coolest guy ever. And then he wants to be like his best friend, his absolute best friend. But then they have a falling out, and now he kind of resents him and hates him, and then tries to get his revenge. Now, that part of the movie isn't completely an unknown sort of plot, right? However, similar stories have happened, where two characters, they become friends, but then they become enemies. So this movie could have been that. Now, there's what's happened in the movie and what should have happened in the movie. The number one rule of any movie is you need a protagonist that is sympathetic, right? You want to like the main character at least enough to, number one, follow him throughout the movie, and number two, root for him. The problem with Tim Robinson's character is I could not root for him anymore. Again, I got about 20 minutes in. There's going to be some spoilers for Friendship, but if you want to see that, it's your funeral. What should happen in the movie is that Tim's character should really need a friend, right? Maybe he's had friends before, and for whatever reason he got betrayed, and he's really reluctant to, start up a new friendship with someone. And then when he does start a friendship up with Paul Rudd, it turns out it changes his life for the better. And they kind of do some of that in this film. Except they burden it with a lot of details that kind of sells out the overall concept for some cheap laughs early on. So, for instance, Tim Robinson is married to a woman who's recovering from cancer, right? And the show or the movie starts out with them at a sort of support group for cancer victims, which is a good start. That is a good start in a comedy because you're starting with something very, very serious. But Tim yucks it up right out the gate, which is bad. What you wanted was a sort of baseline of Tim is a normal guy that you relate to. His wife went through a hard time. Like, you want to see that. Maybe he's a little nervous being in the group or uncomfortable, but he does some cringe bit during that kind of is it's not even a good laugh, and it kind of undermines the foundation you're laying for the rest of the movie. What you could have had in that scene, for instance, is you could have had a scene in which they're in the cancer support group and somebody is very sad. Like, it's awful how sad they are. They are crying. They're going to die. And Tim, as a normal guy, because you want to start out normal in a comedy, and I learned this in improv. You want to start out relatively normal in your scene and then slowly tick it up. So what you want to start is with Tim trying to do what you would do in that situation, right? So if you're in an uncomfortable scene where there's cancer victims all around, what would you do? Well, you'd probably just be respectful and quiet, and that's what a smart character would do, right? You want to play characters at the height of their intelligence. You don't want to say anything cringe. And even the actress playing his wife says something kind of cringe and very sort of comedy movie line. She rattles off a bunch of things she thought she'd never would have again, including orgasms, which already is like too high to start out with. It should have been very straightforward. Back in the 90s, this would have been a straightforward kind of scene with a actress like, I don't know, Helen Hunt, right? You could see Helen Hunt in a role. Yeah, it's been really tough. We came out of a tough year of me recovering from cancer, but my hair grew back and we're feeling better. And then, the actor husband would be someone like Paul Reiser, who would go, yeah, we, it was really tough, but we're coming out of this, so it's good. And everybody applauds and you move on to the next person, just to establish the reality. The problem with this movie is right out the gate, they're already trying to undermine the reality for a cheap laugh. This isn't a sketch show. This isn't SNL. This is a movie. And you got to start with a good baseline before you start kicking it up. So one of the things, again, what you could have done, and if they come back to this group thing, is just establish that a couple of different characters that you're going to come back to, and then you're going to up the ante. So, for instance, someone who's crying because they found out they had cancer, and it's really bad, and he feels bad, but it's almost over the top. Them crying, you could skirt it a little, but overall, it's like kind of a serious scene to start out with, and that's okay in a comedy because later it's going to come back, because everything comes back in a comedy 3 times. You got the first time, which might be what I would call a 0 move, and then 3 moves, and on the 3rd move you push it off a cliff. So you could have other people in the support group who are very upset about having cancer, and then in another scene they're even more upset, and Tim is desperately trying to empathize, but they're so upset it's not working, or they're not hearing them, or they misinterpret something, and he gets more and more uncomfortable. Another time it's really bad, they're kind of obnoxious. It might tie into the plot, which is him and Paul Rudd feuding, and then the 3rd time, like, he's just had enough. But that's not even the focus of the movie. The focus of the movie is Paul Rudd and Tim's character. Now, here's Paul Rudd over here. I don't know if you could see him. Here's the group. He gets invited to this group of friends. Here they are hanging out. So he gets invited to this friend group of Paul Rudd. He gets invited to he's a weatherman, he plays in a band, he's like the coolest guy ever. But again, Tim's character already fantasizes these wacky scenes of them being more, I shouldn't say more than friends, but like super best friends, right? That's already turning the concept up to 11. Like, I get it, he likes him. You can just show that. You don't need elaborate fantasy scenes of them driving in a car together, or Tim fantasizes playing drummer in his band. Like, He can just be awkward. That's enough. And it's not that funny. It's just not that funny. You're doing too much right out the gate. How are you going to up the ante of this if you're already doing this? You haven't even gotten to the feud, and already I'm like, there's a lot here. Because I think they're formatting it more like a SNL sketch, and that's too much. An SNL sketch is going to be 2 to 5 minutes, so you can keep up that kind of pace. You might as well throw everything in 2 to 5 minutes because it's going to be over. But when you're doing a movie, you gotta relax a little bit. You gotta give us some amount of reality, so when you start twisting it, it's funny. You can't come right out the gate like that. So eventually, the big scene that made me stop watching the movie, like I literally cannot watch the movie anymore, because I just have no empathy for Tim Robinson's character, is Paul Rudd has his friends over. Now, Tim's already done some awkward things. There was one funny scene that I liked. Tim bumps into a sliding door, like he's really worried about making an impression to the group, and he bumps into a sliding door really hard, and then he opens it and comes in, and Paul Rudd said something, "Man, you hit that thing hard. Are you okay?" And then the whole thing just shatters. It was unexpected. That was good. That was the kind of stuff we needed to see more of early on. Because we, as I use the royal we, like everybody's done stupid things like that. You get nervous meeting new people. He should have been nervous throughout meeting Paul Rudd, hanging out with Paul Rudd because he's so cool. He should have been talking to his wife. Instead, they do these crazy bits with his wife and I think her son, where they kiss on the lips, which is, again, kind of hilarious and kind of weird, but it's distracting from the main plot, which is supposed to be the friendship between these two. Like, the bit should be focused on them. That's a big bit to put on side characters who really aren't the main characters. Like, she has a son. Oh, and did I mention she's also regularly seeing her ex-boyfriend? Even though they're married and it's clear she's having some sort of affair and Tim is completely clueless on it. I mean, Jesus. How many more bits are you going to jam in here before you get to the main bit? But anyway, Paul Rudd, for whatever reason in his friend group, and Tim is very awkward, decides to go into the basement and they're going to do some boxing, right? And this is something I'm not totally against in a scene, because I actually did this when I was younger. Not as adults. As adults, it's a little much, but sure. You could see a group of guys getting together. Hey, let's do some boxing. And they talk Tim into doing it because he's the new guy. And Paul Rudd pops him in the face. And it's a little much. And then Tim sort of staggers around. And then, it's okay, it's okay. They start boxing again. Boom, pops him a second time. Well, now apparently Tim gets mad because he says he's fine, and then he waits for his chance, and then he sucker punches Paul Rudd super hard a couple of times. Now that whole scene is just awful. I lost all my empathy for Tim Robinson's character, Craig. I just lost all empathy for him. I thought, and this should have been the case, Paul Rudd would be the weird guy. Paul Rudd would be super, super cool, but in the end decide that, if I was writing it, Craig was just not cool enough to be in his friend circle. He's just too awkward. He does something that's that doesn't fit in with the group, something cringe, something stupid. But it's something that we as the viewer could see ourselves doing, right? So he breaks his sliding door. That's a pretty big thing. That's not a reason to kick the guy out of the group as long as he's going to pay for it. You could do similar things like that. He breaks the toilet. People do that. Or, maybe he trips down the stairs and breaks some precious item that's important to Paul Rudd, and that's the last straw. And he doesn't mean it, but it happens, and he's kicked out of the group, and now he resents him. and he tries his best to patch things up, but Paul Rudd won't forgive him because the circumstances of the events, he's convinced that Robinson's character is a bad guy. Instead, Tim Robinson is a total effing weirdo. After he punches out Paul Rudd and realizes the mistake he made, he has a really bizarre reaction, admitting his mistake, and then he eats soap in punishing himself, which doesn't even make any sense. Like, eons ago, people would maybe wash your mouth out with soap. That was an expression. And that would be something, I don't know, some people in the 40s and 50s did when you said a curse word or something along those lines. They didn't do it when you punched out your friend when he wasn't looking and basically sucker punched him in front of a bunch of other friends. That's not what you would do. You would probably say, okay, here, you punch me now. I'm going to give you a free shot. Because I punched you, I got mad. Like, that would be playing at the height of the intelligence, that he would give him a free punch. It doesn't make any sense for him to eat a bunch of soap and then he says stuff like, I've been a bad boy, while he's got soap in the mouth. Is it funny? It doesn't work with the scene at all. It's just weird and cringe. If you saw that scene maybe as part of a clip or a sketch, you might think it's funny because it's like so weird you'd laugh. But it undermines the entire movie because it makes Tim Robinson's character such an incredible effing weirdo, you can't get behind him anymore. I just don't want to see any more of the movie. I don't care. I'm now rooting for Paul Rudd. But Paul Rudd's not the main character of the movie. Tim Robinson is. If he's the main character, he needs to be sympathetic. Even in a comedy. Or it just needs to be comedic. Maybe you could have established Tim Robinson as a real grumpy guy who doesn't have any friends, and there's a reason for that. He's kind of an a-hole, but he's kind of a lovable one. That would have been tough, but it would have been doable. He still would have to be likable. You would have to sympathize with him. You just can't. After 20, 30 minutes, I just couldn't sympathize with his character anymore. And I had to question why I was watching the movie. And I looked at the time and I said, there's another hour left. I can't watch this. I just can't watch this. So, I don't see it going anywhere funny. Even if Tim now is going to get revenge on Paul, I don't want him to get revenge on Paul. I want Paul to get revenge on him. I want to follow Paul's character because he's more charismatic and he didn't do anything bad. Now, maybe later it's revealed he's actually a bad guy. I don't know. But I don't care. Because Tim was revealed as being a total weirdo and a total a-hole in the 20 minutes I saw him. So you need to not make your character, you can't drive him off a cliff in the first half hour of the movie. You got to make us root for Tim. You got to say, oh, that's a shame. Not, what the hell is he doing? That's not what his character should be. This movie is relatively easy. It has to be a guy who desperately wants friends, is super nervous about making those friends, meets the coolest guy in the world, and then either he blows it and then makes things worse by trying to patch things up, or you could flip that. He finds out that Paul Rudd is not the guy he thought he was. He's actually kind of an a-hole underneath. Maybe he doesn't ostracize Tim's character, but ostracizes somebody else, and when Tim points that out, then he gets kicked out of the friend group. Or maybe that Tim, joining the friend group, outshines Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd can't have that competition and kicks him out of the friend group out of spite. Like, you want to, again, sympathize with Tim. Like, Tim's trying to be a good guy, but Paul Rudd is the problem, or just circumstances are the problem. It can't be Tim's fault because you shut off the movie, as I did. And I think you would if you watched it. Can't recommend it. Can't finish it. And you might say, oh, that's unfair. Maybe it gets better. I don't care if it gets better. It can't. Because making a movie, again, is like building a house. And the first act is the foundation. The first act has to be solid or the house falls over. There's a very shaky foundation here. And I can't get on board with it. The house might continue to stand, but I don't care. I don't want to live in the house. I don't want to go in it. And that's a real problem. In a comedy, though, you might be able to overcome it with so many jokes and gags, like a movie like Scream, or not Scream, what is it called? Scary Movie, right? Airplane, something like that, where there's just so many gags. The character's so crazy and inconsistent, it doesn't matter anyway. It's just about one joke after another. If you had made it like that, maybe, I don't know what you'd call the theme of this movie, but sure, maybe you could do a big send up of thrillers, and it's just all various thrillers jammed into one. Or you could have just done a bunch of bits where Tim is very unlucky. He turns Paul Rudd against him, doesn't mean to, and everything he tries to do to patch things up just goes horribly, horribly wrong. Instead, he's a weird character who's kind of obnoxious. He also has a job in which he spends his time trying to get people addicted to apps, phone apps, in order to make more money. That's not a good job for your protagonist, because he brags about it and he laughs, and you think, yeah, that's kind of a douche thing to do, dude. So yeah, whoever wrote this, I could see a bunch of sketch guys sitting around writing the bits, and maybe the bits individually would be funny, or in short bursts, like sketches that they could be funny. The sliding door was funny. But overall, when you put all those things together, you're screwing up the 3-act structure. It's first act, second act, third act, denouement, the conclusion. It's got to build to something. The movie kind of starts up here and kind of just goes, stays there. You have to build. And, just a bunch of random information doesn't help. It has to be specific information that builds on your theme. The theme should be friendship, right? Tim Robinson should be a character who had a lot of trouble making friends, keeping friends. Again, maybe he was betrayed. And then Paul Rudd comes along, the answer to his prayers. Now he's finally got a friend. And the wife being a big weirdo doesn't help either, because she's just there to throw in a couple of jokes. She's not there to be supportive of a character who then later, when it's revealed Paul Rudd is not a good guy, or that he's trying desperately to win him back, but Paul Rudd doesn't want anything to do with him. Maybe he's a normal guy. The wife should be there to be sort of the sounding board for the audience when Tim does start to get crazy. And that should happen late in the second act into the third act in a comedy. In the first act, he should be relatively normal. Interesting, but normal. It should hint at some comedy nuggets that are coming along, but it shouldn't go full bore into any of them. It should set them up. If you're gonna add a weird character, it shouldn't be Tim. It should be one of the other characters. They should be weird. If Tim's the only weird guy, yeah, you're really putting a lot on that one character. And bottom line, Tim Robinson, I don't think he's capable of keeping me entertained like that in a movie where he's sort of an obnoxious character and he just keeps bringing the funny. Because it's not that funny. It's just kind of cringe. It's like, why did you do that? Doesn't make any sense to the reality of the movie. And if you're going to say, well, he's trying to do comedy, well, he's in a movie with a plot. Again, if it was sketches, no problem. I mean, if it was him and Paul Rudd as a variety of different characters, and You know, in one scene, he returns a package to him that the mailman delivered to his house by mistake, and then in a completely different scene, there are different characters, and he does the soap bit. You could maybe work with that. But all in one character, yeah, it doesn't quite work for me. So, and this is what I learned in my improv days. You want to be relatively normal in the first act with your protagonists and your characters. You want to hint at things. When you write a screenplay, you'll write a draft, and then when you go back to polish it, you'll know what's coming up at the end of the movie. And then when you go back to polish the first act, you can then drop the little seeds, the little messages, the little, what do they call them? Oh gosh. The, the little secret foreshadowing. There's another word I'm trying to think of, but it escapes me. But you could do some foreshadowing. So when it pays off in the second and third acts, mostly in the third, people go, oh yeah, he said that in the beginning. It feels like these guys sort of sat around and wrote this and cobbled together a bunch of sketches and tried just a little too hard to make comedy. It's got to build. Washing his mouth out with soap and saying, oh, I've been a bad boy, while he's eating soap, that would definitely be something for the third act, I guess. It's just weird. It's too high. It's definitely too high for the first act. You might have gotten away with it late in the second act. If it had built up to something, there had been some reason for it. It just seems that Tim Robinson's character is a weirdo. That's not a good reason. Sorry to harp on this movie, but this has been the problem with comedies, unfortunately. I was sort of looking forward to this movie. I saw it on the stream, and I thought, oh, great, I'll watch this and review it for tomorrow. Instead, I got 20 minutes in, and I'm like, I can't watch any more of this. I instead watched an episode of Archer. And segueing into that, interestingly enough, Archer also provides an illustrative point to what I'm saying about writing comedy. And that's this. I watched season 13, episode 1. Now, I don't know if you've followed the Archer TV show. It's pretty funny. You should watch it. But the overall arc of the show is that Sterling Archer is a secret agent, the world's greatest secret agent, but he's actually kind of an obnoxious a-hole. And his mother runs the spy agency, and for the first, I guess it was, I'm going to say, 7 seasons? 7 or 8? It was all about spy stuff in this weird world where I guess it was still the 80s and the KGB was still around and they're still doing Cold War stuff, which was fun. It was a lot of fun. Then there was a storyline in which Archer got shot and fell into a coma. I'm not sure if they were thinking about canceling the show or not, but they went on with it. While Archer was in a coma, they did 3 seasons where Archer was the main character in 3 different seasons, and he was in a different genre. So they did a hard-boiled detective. Then they did this one that takes place in like 1938. It was sort of an Indiana Jones thing. And then they did one that takes place in the future, kind of a bunch of parodies of aliens and stuff like that. But then, they got really far away from the concept, which I was starting to lose interest in the show, and that was right around the time I stopped watching TV. So I vowed, like, well, maybe after Archer's done and it's all on Netflix now, I'll go back and watch the episode. So I decided to pop one in tonight. So the season opener of season 13, they go back to the spy agency, which made the show funny, which everybody liked. And they sort of redesign it a little bit based on the events in the show. But mostly, the show had accumulated a ton of baggage. And the writers relieved the characters of some of the baggage with this soft reset of the events in Archer. And the show is pretty good. It felt more like a season 2 or 3 episode of Archer rather than season 13. It had some fun stuff. It had some spy stuff. It had an art heist gone wrong kind of thing. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was a little. I mean, one thing it was burdened with is a lot of stuff from the previous episodes in terms of Archer and his relationship with one of the other characters. But overall, it was a return to form. And it was most of the characters back where they belong in their various roles. That is partly the problem with comedy. People have forgotten sort of the various roles, whether it's in movies or a TV show, that characters should have. They've, I don't know, sort of gone off the reservation in Hollywood by subverting expectations and doing stuff that's, I don't know, that deconstructs characters, take them wildly out of their element. And I understand the impulse of that as a creative. I'm feeling a little bit that way with the Pineys, but what I try to do with the Pineys is stick to the theme, which is South Jersey and the folklore and the history, while at the same time trying to mix it up. So, for instance, book 19 and book 17 were sort of departures from the normal kind of formats, I'll say, a little bit. But it was still very much part of the core of the concept, which is it's all about South Jersey. It's all about the cousins and the various supernatural elements in South Jersey. That's what Archer did. It went back to their core elements of being spies and, you know, cutting down your coworkers kind of thing. It went back to an office, which was, there were a lot of office gags in Archer that were very funny. It went back to the break room, which I missed. In the Pineys, we always go back to the Pine Barrens, the Jersey Devil, and things like that. This movie should have taken a lesson from that. And comedy in particular, repetition is the greatest form of comedy. You wanted to look at other movies about friendship, especially comedy movies, and take from that and sort of build upon that in this movie. But I think they were too busy trying to show off their comedy chops, and it's very uneven, in my opinion. And I have no interest in seeing the rest of it. So there is a format to this. And keep in mind, a format is not a formula. Okay? It's not a formula. You can call those two the same things, but it's a little different. You know, following a formula, a lot of times you're ripping off things. In comedy, that's a lot harder to do because comedy requires surprise, so you got to put bits in. So you can do parodies of things all day long. It's not a problem. You can take the exact plot from a movie about friendship and redo it as long as you're making it funny and telling different jokes. But if it's not funny, then you fail. And but there still is an art to it. And unfortunately, friendship, I just found it insufferably bad. But I think this is part of the problem. I think, who wrote this thing, by the way? People have forgotten in Hollywood how to format these things. I'm going to guess Tim Robinson wrote some of this. No, Andrew DeYoung, who also directed it. Let's see his creds. Airbnb, a short, a TV series called The Decameron. Yeah, well, he directed Our Flag Means Death. So that was a TV series with Taika Waititi. It looked funny-ish. Would It Kill You to Laugh? I Love You. A TV series called Penis, but it's spelled Pen 15. It's Pen 15, but it looks like penis. That looks to be the highest rated thing he worked on. And a bunch of other stuff I never heard of. So, and those were all director credits. Let's see his writing credits. Friendship got a 6.8. Would It Kill You to Laugh? So yeah, not a lot of great comedy credits here. Nothing really I recognize. Some shorts, TV series that I've never heard of. So I don't know. Um, I mean, kudos for him for getting it done. That's not to be dismissed out of hand. But Hollywood, someone, either the producers, Andrew himself, Tim, really need to sit down and go. We need a screenwriter to look at this. Somebody who understands the 3 act structure, who could have formatted this better and built to something during the course of the movie. That's just my opinion. So take a lesson from this friendship thing, and when you're doing comedy, act 1, act 2, act 3. You introduce the characters, you keep it relatively straight, you hint at some of the things that are about to happen, there's maybe some light funny bits. The second act, you turn up the heat. You turn it all the way up. You make it terrible for the main protagonist, but you keep him likable. You keep him likable. He's trying to do good. He's trying to be a good person, but it blows up in his face. In the third act, that's when you push all the concepts off a cliff. You can have meat soap or whatever. As long as it's funny, you're good. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Thanks for tuning in today. I am currently, I'm probably still there, at the Scary Book Fest in Flemington, New Jersey. If this is still Saturday as you see this, I am going to do my talk at some point. I'm not sure what time, on how to hunt the Jersey Devil. I believe they're going to watch a movie at some point, and there's going to be various authors there. Should be a great day. I hope you come out. Sunday, I will be at Lucille's Luncheonette up in Warren Grove from 10 to 2. That's the diner, the luncheonette that has the statue of the Jersey Devil. Hope to see you there. We'll see you in the next one.